guys, how's it going? My name is Alex and I am a car photographer and videographer based out of Calgary. And in this episode, we are going to take a look at the 5 kind of differences or things that you should know if you want to switch between photography and videography and some of the basic things. So let's dive into that. So the first tip that I want to give you is essentially to know your settings. When it comes to photography, you worry about aperture, ISO, shutter speed, things of that nature. And when it comes to video, you kind of have to worry about your frame rate. So your frame rate is essentially going to be 24 frames per second if you're going to be shooting kind of daily life, average motion, maybe talking head type of video. And the reason it's set at 24 frames per second is that's more or less the industry standard for cinematic films that we watch at movie theaters and stuff like that. When it comes to shooting your video at 24 frames per second, the rule of thumb with your shutter speed is generally that you double your frame rate. So for shooting at 24, our shutter speed needs to stay at 1/50th of a second. If you're shooting that slow-mo, buttery goodness B-roll at maybe 120 frames per second, then your shutter speed needs to be at 250th, so 1/250. Now for some of you this is really basic knowledge, but for others this could be the difference between shooting in auto with your video and starting to actually take control of the choices you're making in your video. And again, as photographers, you really aren't locked into those decisions unless you really are trying to capture something fast or use a slow shutter speed specifically to capture a certain style of image. But for the most part, photographers get to go all over the map. So then that brings us into our second point, which is exposure with video. So exposure is super important because I don't know if you've noticed in like most cinematic films you've watched that the sky is typically not blown out, and by blown out like completely white. So in photography you can shoot a photo inside and you'll see like the windows are super blown out, or maybe the sky super blown out or just white, there's no more detail in it. But what you'll notice in proper cinematography, some of the great YouTube videos you watch, is that the sky is still fully, and you can see all the detail in the sky, and that's super important when it comes to making really great cinematic movies. So how do you do that? You've got your settings at 1/50th over a second, you've got your aperture like at 4.0 or something, and you've got no ISO, but it's still so blown out. That's where these guys come in. So this is an ND filter, a neutral density filter, and I've got one on this lens here. So this is what takes you from overexposed, blown out video to actually being able to expose your shots properly and retain all the highlights that you might be blown out in your video. So I'll show you just real quick here what it looks like to be blown out. Ooh, that's darker. There you go. So the sky is gone. Peace. And here we go. We are back to having everything in focus. So what's really great about ND filters, you just put them on the front of your lens, you spin them like this, you can add exposure or drop exposure however much you want to make sure that you're retaining your highlights. Now of course there are some rules around this, guys, like sometimes you won't be able to retain all the highlights, and that's okay. You just gotta judge that based on your situation or what kind of movie you're making. In cinema they add lighting, and that's kind of what we'll get into in later points. And one last cool thing I'll add about ND filters, if you're a car photographer like me, typically we're used to using CPL filters, circular polarizing filters. ND filters are essentially just like 2 of these spinning together, and so when we're trying to like cut out reflections on our cars using the CPL filter and you want to put that on the front of your lens, well, don't worry, ND filters are essentially CPL filters. Just mix them together to make your car photos look great. Now we're going to shoot some photos. We've got our CPL filter on our 35mm, and we can just do whatever shutter speed we want, whatever aperture we want. It's easy. It's so easy. Alright, so the third one, guys, is movement and all the different kinds of movement that you can use to tell your story. For example, what I was just using the gimbal there, that creates really steady footage to make really buttery cinematic, nice looking steady footage. So there's that. There's handheld footage, which is the complete opposite, which you could tell the story through I don't know, like a rough moment, a rough emotional moment, or for example, if we're doing car photography or videography, showing kind of the engine revving up, the speed of the engine, and then add in some sound, which is our fourth point. There's also things like monopods, shoulder rigs, things like this that really help to stabilize and give several points of contact to your body so it's not super shaky, but still feels very human and very natural. A lot of kind of cinematic films are shot on this with kind of like the shoulder rigs and the easy rigs kind of overhead. They use those a lot. And also we've got, of course, the tripod, which we are using right now, which you can use for a talking head interview, things like this, or even establishing shots, stuff like that, which is kind of useful as well. So all different kinds of cool ways you can move your camera to tell different types of stories. That is obviously different from shooting photography. Guys, another great tool that you guys have when you're shooting video is the use of audio. So you can either capture that live, you can add it in post, but audio adds just a huge amount of motion to whatever you're filming, whether that's the music track you choose, the exhaust notes of a car, the sounds of the environment around you. All of these things help draw you into your film, and it's really important to try and incorporate these into them. So I need to get some shots of this Tacoma so we can add it to our drone shots, make it sound like we're driving the car, add some shots to us spinning around here, and show you how I can use some capturing live audio, putting it in post. And then also, I don't have any environment shots, so I'll have to get that in post and then add them in later to my drone shots. I'll show you how I do that. Alright guys, and I think one last probably major thing we should note is the amount of gear that it takes to be a videographer. Now for the most part, a good photographer can come in with one camera, one good lens, and just take incredible photos, and then they're done. They just kind of walk around, snap, snap, snap. It's great. Being a photographer is awesome. Oftentimes you can just have one carry bag, go through 2 batteries in a whole day, whether you're a wedding videographer, a car photographer, whatever. It's just super easy. Video, like for example, to make this one, we used a gimbal, we used 2 cameras, we need audio gear, lapel mics, you need lights sometimes. I didn't use any for this video, but if you tend to do any interview footage or you want to light anything indoors, it takes lights. So it's not to push you away from video. Video is awesome, and I think the better you get at it, the more you can kind of understand what gear you like, what gear you use the most. So I'd say just do a lot of research before you get into video, which lenses you might want to get, what kind of camera you want to get. They are coming out with some amazing specs on cameras these days that make making videos, quite frankly, quite easy. And the world of video is so much fun. It's so much fun to be able to put music to visuals and tell a story and get people riled up with that. I think it's so much more fun than photo, even though I do think taking photos is a heck of a lot easier at times, but each of their own. So if you guys are getting into videography or want to get into videography, here's just kind of 5 things that I hope were helpful for you to maybe understand kind of the basics. And again, don't let these things kind of get in your way. If you don't have an ND filter, shoot in auto, learn what you want to learn about video. If you don't have any audio like mics or whatever, use the onboard camera that's on your camera and you will be fine, and just kind of learn what you need as you go, but don't let not having these things stop you from starting. So that's it for me, guys. I really do hope this was helpful. If you are getting into car photography or videography, head over to my Instagram channel and check me out at The Car Creative and ask me any questions over there, or you can leave some comments down below and I'll get to you as soon as I can. So yeah, if you guys like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe, hit that like button, whatever. If you guys are into car reviews, kind of tech reviews, tutorials, whatever on cars, that's what I do here. But I really just appreciate you guys watching very, very much. So we'll see you in the next one. Peace.